Believe it or not, my crazy neighbor reported me because I was having a barbecue in my own room. She said the smoke was contaminating her air and called the police, thinking she was going to screw me over. But in the end, she was the one who got screwed over. Nothing like a good barbecue to celebrate a day off. The smell of meat grilling, the sound of fat sizzling on the coals, a cold beer in my hand, and the certainty that it was going to be a perfect day. Or so I thought, until I realized that my neighbor was about to turn the moment into a living hell. Ever since I moved to that neighborhood, I had noticed that some people had an uncontrollable need to meddle in other people's lives. But this woman could take it to an Olympic level. She had a radar for detecting other people's happiness and a special talent for destroying it without the slightest remorse. It started with small signs. First, the curtain of her window, which faced my backyard, moving insistently. I knew I was being watched. Then, her half-closed eyes peering through the fence boards like an amateur detective trying to catch a crime in progress. Only the crime, in this case, was a juicy steak on the grill. I barely had time to turn the meat, and there she was, coming out of the house like someone on a sacred mission to save the world from a mortal enemy, the neighbor's barbecue. The woman marched through her yard as if she were about to resolve an international crisis, her arms crossed, her face one of pure discontent and that passive-aggressive energy of someone who has clearly already decided that they are going to turn someone's life into hell. They just haven't chosen the exact reason yet. In my mind, the options were endless. Maybe the coal was polluting her air. Maybe the sound of the fire burning was distracting her from finding new reasons to complain. Or maybe, just maybe, she really had nothing else to do and needed to come up with a non-existent problem to justify her own existence. But I still had hope. A naive part of me believed that maybe she just wanted to ask for sugar or the weather. Nonsense, of course. The look she cast at the grill was the same as one would give to a war scene. Pure horror, as if every piece of meat there was screaming for help. It was quite a spectacle to see her face the barbecue as if it were a direct attack on her moral integrity. I didn't even have to say anything, because I already knew there was a bomb coming. The barbecue had only just begun, but she was the real meat on my neck. I knew that woman was going to cause trouble, but I didn't think it would happen so quickly. If there was a worldwide race to find a reason to meddle in other people's lives, this neighbor would certainly take the gold. The scene was worthy of a dramatic movie. She was standing in the yard, arms crossed, staring at my grill as if I were committing a war crime, which made me wonder, was she going to try to call the Hague Tribunal over a piece of roasting meat? But of course, before any direct attack, she needed the classic dramatic sigh approach. You know, that heavy, exaggerated sigh that a person lets out just to make sure you know they're annoyed? That's exactly what it was. I ignored it. I carried on turning the meat, as if nothing was happening. After all, it was my backyard, my meat, my grill, and, above all, my day of peace. But peace was something this woman seemed to be allergic to, because her next step was to glance sideways, as if expecting an audience, and then start to approach. Her gait was determined, worthy of someone who thinks she has authority over everything around her. When she got close to the fence that divided our yards, she wrinkled her nose as if she had just stepped on something rotten. The problem? The smell of grilling meat.
That's not allowed here.
Her voice came out firm, as if she had just recited an article of law. I blinked a few times, trying to process what I had just heard. What do you mean?
The smell of meat. It's invading my space. I'm vegan and it's assaulting me.
Oh, right. The smell. The wind, that unpredictable entity, had dared to carry barbecue particles into Madam's house, and now she felt personally attacked. I could have argued, I could have said that it didn't make any sense, but I knew that there was no point in logic against certain people, so I just shook my head and carried on with the grill. But she didn't give up. Oh, no. This woman wasn't going to stop until she turned me into a neighborhood criminal.
I've already sent complaints to the neighborhood association. This will stop.
That's when I realized she didn't just want to complain, she wanted to ban it. She wanted to turn my barbecue into something illegal in my own backyard. It was almost funny. If it were up to her, would the environmental police come by helicopter to arrest me for roasting a piece of meat? I didn't doubt it. What she didn't know was that I'm not the type to bow my head to people like that. If she wanted war, I was already sharpening the spit. If I thought that woman was going to settle down after the first attempt to censor my barbecue, I was sorely mistaken. Because for her, nothing was enough. She wanted to win. She stood there for a while, staring at me, waiting for me to give in and put out the fire like a good, obedient neighbor. But when she realized that I wasn't the least bit concerned about her opinion, she pulled out her cell phone as if she were about to solve a major criminal case. It was obvious what she was going to do. And frankly, I was excited, because certain situations are so absurd that the only possible reaction is to watch from the sidelines and see how far the insanity can go. And there she was, dialing the police, with the face of someone who is absolutely certain that justice is on her side.
Hello? I need to report an environmental violation.
I nearly choked on my beer. Environmental violation. That was it. Now I was on the same level as someone who dumps oil in the ocean. I kept turning my meat, pretending I wasn't paying attention, but every word that came out of her mouth made my day more fun.
Yes, it's burning meat. The smell is unbearable. I can't breathe properly.
And then came the best moment, silence. That silence that only happens when the person on the other end of the line asks something ridiculously obvious like, "Do you want to call the police because your neighbor is having a barbecue?" I don't know exactly what the caller said, but I could tell by the tone of her voice that they weren't taking the complaint seriously. And rightly so. But, of course, a person like that doesn't give up so easily. She hung up with a dramatic sigh and stood there, tapping her foot on the floor, possibly trying to decide what her next evil plan would be. I, on the other hand, could only laugh, because if there's one thing I love to see, it's someone completely out of touch with reality, trying to bend the world to their will, and failing miserably. The smell of meat was still in the air. The barbecue was still going strong, and the only crime that was really happening there was that of a woman completely losing her grip on reality. But I knew it wasn't over yet. People like that can't accept losing. And I was right. She had one more shot, and it was just as ridiculous as the first. If there's one thing I learned from that woman, it's that her sense of the ridiculous was non-existent. A normal person, after being ignored by the police, would have accepted defeat and moved on. But not her. I realized something was wrong when she returned home and, instead of giving up, reappeared a few minutes later with a cloth mask on her face and a spray bottle in her hand. I swear on all that is holy, she started spraying something into the air, as if she was trying to purify the environment. It was the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. The smell of the barbecue still dominated the yard, and there she was, sneezing something, with theatrical movements, as if she were exorcising an evil spirit. If I had any doubt that this woman was completely out of her mind, I had none now. After spending half a bottle of product and realizing that the wind was basically blowing it all back in her face, the woman stopped, put her hands on her waist, and took a deep breath, as if she was already planning her plan B. And that's when it got really absurd. She went back into the house, and, a few minutes later, I heard a metallic noise coming from her side of the fence. I turned my head and had to blink 3 times to believe what I was seeing. The crazy woman was throwing buckets of water in the direction of my barbecue.
This is to put out this filthy fire.
The first blast didn't hit the grill, but it soaked my entire yard. The second bucket came soon after, hitting part of the charcoal, sending up a pile of smoke and ash. I was paralyzed, not from fear, but from sheer shock and disbelief, because this woman, a grown adult, had just tried to delete my barbecue by throwing water over the fence. And do you know what the funniest thing was? She had to run away afterwards because the wind blew the smoke straight into her face. The irony was so perfect that I almost choked with laughter. And it was at that moment that I decided I had been patient enough. Without saying a word, I picked up my cell phone and dialed the same number she had called earlier. If she could make senseless accusations, so could I. Only this time, when the police arrived, it was very different. I swear that, up until that moment, I still had a shred of hope that this woman had a modicum of common sense. But after seeing her trying to extinguish my barbecue as if it were a forest fire, I realized that I was dealing with someone completely out of touch with reality. So I did what any sensible person would do. I called the police. And look, the universe loves me, because who turned up in the car were the same policemen she had called earlier. When I saw the two of them getting out of the car with that "I can't believe we're here again" look, I almost started laughing. This time, however, it wasn't her who was calling. It was me. I calmly explained what had happened, from her unsuccessful attempts to stop me from having a barbecue, to the glorious moment when she started throwing water over the fence, as if she was trying to put out the fires of hell. The policemen looked at each other, clearly trying to hold back their laughter, and then went to talk to the protagonist of the disaster. She had obviously come full of drama.
This man is putting my health at risk.
The policeman just raised an eyebrow and pointed at my still smoking barbecue, which now looked more like a flood victim than a piece of kitchen equipment. "So you dumped buckets of water in his yard?" Her silence was delicious. That awkward pause in which she tried to formulate an argument that didn't make her look completely crazy. In the end, the policeman gave her a lecture worthy of elementary school. They explained that I was within my rights to have a barbecue in my backyard, that the smell of meat was not a crime, and that throwing water on other people's property was a fine case of nuisance. But the best part came later. One of the policemen turned to me and asked, "Do you wish to press charges?" And I, with the serenity of someone who knows they've won, replied, "Yes." The woman's expression changed on the spot. If before she had been playing the role of an indignant citizen, now she looked like she had been hit by a truck of reality. Because, unlike her complaint, mine was real. And that's how she had to officially answer for disturbance and trespassing. But the karma didn't stop there. After this incident, the neighbors, who had apparently had enough of her for years, began to turn against her. Within days, the woman who thought she was the queen of the neighborhood became a social ghost. People stopped talking to her, children started making fun of her in the street, and even the trustee of the neighborhood association tried to make life difficult for her. And it wasn't even a month before the "for sale" sign appeared in front of her house. The reign of the woman who wanted to criminalize barbecues had come to an end. Well, I made a point of celebrating her departure in the best possible way, with a nice barbecue. This time, without interruptions. Have you ever had to deal with someone like that? The kind of person who just can't see others living in peace and needs to make trouble? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your stories. And if you laughed at Karen having a bad time, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Want to see more absurd stories like this? Then click on the card and come with me to the next video.